Hi, I'm Zach,
And I'm Andy.
and here we're doing relevant stuff again, but this time on Castlevania Bloodlines.
Ooh, spooky!
So, we both played through this game recently for the first time and decided we want to do a video on it.
Mm-hmm.
And
It was very arduous.
yeah, it was pretty tough, but not as tough as Castlevania usually is, at least.
Yeah, I suppose not. I mean, I was able to beat it, so that should mean something.
Yeah, I didn't spend too much time beating it, but at the same time, I'm not, like, disappointed in that. I was actually kind of, like, pleasantly surprised, like, oh, that was nice.
Yeah, I think it took me a little bit longer than it took you, but I'm not great at these games. I probably couldn't beat it with John, I think, to this day.
Yeah, we'll get to John Morris in a sec.
Alright.
Generally, what in all is your experience with Castlevania? Like, what was the first game you played, and what do you think of it so far? Because I know you haven't played all of the games yet.
No, the first one I played would have either been... I don't think it was... I'm trying to remember if, like, anyone I knew growing up had the NES games. I don't think they did, so I think the first one I ever played was Symphony of the Night.
I think that was the first for most people. That was my first for sure. I never even heard of Castlevania until that game. After that, I pretty much tried to find every Castlevania game I could get my hands on.
I didn't really get into Castlevania proper until I was older. Really, the only reason I played Symphony, and the reason I knew what it was, is because someone told me about in Metal Gear Solid, Psycho Mantis will read your memory card, and he'll be like, oh, so you like to play Castlevania? I was like, what's he talking about? And so I went and found out. But now I love Castlevania. I love the NES games, I love the DS games. I mean, all of them. Except for, like, some of the 3D ones, but whatever.
Yeah. I guess one thing we should discuss is the differences between what I call classic Castlevania and post-Symphony of the Night Castlevania, or a lot of people call that Metroidvania.
Metroidvania, yeah, which is, I mean, I guess it's an apt name. But yeah, it's Bloodlines and all of its predecessors, they're linear. They're more like a traditional platformer kind of game.
You just go through a level. It is a platformer. It's really hard. There's no RPG elements or exploration, really. There's some branching paths in some of these older games, but a lot of them are pretty straightforward, and Symphony of the Night is really exploration heavy, lots of RPG stuff, and that pretty much continued on to the handheld systems. Just about every other release is just like that.
Yeah, whenever people think about Castlevania now, that's what they're more prone to think about, and that's why most of the newer releases are like that. Except for the most recent, the Lord of the Shadows stuff. They're trying something new now.
Yeah, that's a kind of a God of War-ish thing.
Yeah, I guess it is. So I guess there are kind of three kinds of Castlevanias. It's hard to consider these new ones one of them, though. Whenever I think about Castlevania, I think of Symphony of the Night and the games that are like Symphony of the Night and the original NES Castlevania and the games that are like it. They seem to be the paragons.
Yeah, I don't really... With every 3D game they've come out with, I'm like, that's not really Castlevania. I don't really think so.
No, I suppose not. Anyway, what about the, I mean... We know where it fits with Castlevania as far as gameplay styles. Let's hit the vital stats. I'm using air quotes. The game is the only Castlevania on the Sega Genesis, and it came out in 1994, right?
Mm-hmm, that's right.
Yeah. We got it one day before Japan did, and then Europe got it 2 days after that. Just to give some context to anyone who hasn't played Bloodlines, I guess.
How about the backstory for this game?
It takes place in 1917, during the First World War.
It's interesting because the developers apparently tried to bridge this with Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Sort of.
Yeah. John Morris is, he's from Texas, and he has the vampire killer whip from the Belmont family.
Yes.
He is apparently Quincy Morris's son, a character from the novel. Then... Countess Elizabeth Bartley is supposedly based on Elizabeth Bathory, who is the Blood Countess of Hungary, and she's famous for being a serial killer, and she's often compared to Vlad the Impaler, of whom Dracula is based on.
She's not a very nice person.
Nope. In this story, she's pretty much trying to resurrect her uncle Dracula. He's her uncle.
There's something that confused me about Elizabeth and I don't know if maybe you could fill me in on it. I just have a big thing here in my notes that says Dracula's niece? ? She's Dracula's niece, which would imply that Dracula has a brother or sister, I guess.
Maybe.
But they've never touched. I mean, that's not something that's happened to the game, though, right?
No, as far as I know, this character hasn't been in any other games.
I didn't know if it had been mentioned in like the books or anything, but I couldn't find anything about it. And I thought it was weird they arbitrarily decided, well, she's his niece, and we're not going to talk about her parents or anything.
I guess she's a vampire too, or something. That's not very clearly explained either.
Yeah, well, she's either a vampire or she can make people a vampire, because part of Eric's motivation in this game is his love, Gwendolyn, was turned into a vampire by Elizabeth.
You never even fight her or anything in the game, so I guess that was just a story bit.
As far as I can tell, yes.
Also, Elizabeth Bartley supposedly ordered out the execution of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria.
Yeah, the premise of the game is that the First World War, the Great War, is this sacrificial war, and like all the death that comes of it is supposed to go toward resurrecting Dracula at the end of the game.
Yep.
So
all the blood and chaos.
I mean, we could talk at great length about like the historical, like, I mean, Europe was already on the verge of war and blah 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 blah, but supposedly she's the one who orchestrated the assassination of the Archduke. Whatever.
How about those main characters, both of them?
John and Eric. You talked about John a little bit. You said he's from Texas. He's Quincy Morris's son, and he uses the vampire killer. I think the character that we both used, my favorite character, is Eric. Mm-hmm. Eric, is it Lacarde or Lacard?
I call him Lacard.
Lacard? Most of his motivation is that thing about Gwendolyn, but it specifically says in the instruction booklet that he didn't tell John about that, which I thought was weird. But he uses the Alucard spear. And I guess Eric and John are friends, and they decide they're going to stop Dracula from coming back because they're vampire fighting buddies. That's it. So this game is actually a buddy cop story.
Kind of is. Too bad it wasn't two-player.
Yeah, that would have been great.
That would have been interesting. Both these characters play pretty differently, though. They each have a strength and weakness to them, but I kind of think Eric overall is a better character.
I think the way that you get through the levels is easier with Eric, but I think maybe John has a little bit of an edge in dealing damage to enemies sometimes.
Maybe. I don't know, it was kind of hard to tell. Eric's got a lot more reach.
Yeah, he does have the reach, and he gets to hit them twice sometimes.
Yeah, if you fully upgrade his spear, it seems to hit enemies more than once.
I don't know. I preferred Eric. Maybe Eric is easier. Who knows?
John Morris swings around with his whip. It's sort of like what they did in Castlevania 4.
Except you can do it anywhere.
You can do it anywhere, whereas in Castlevania 4 you had to hit like these little pegs or something. And it's overall I didn't find it that useful in this game though.
No, when I was playing as John, I would only do it and then giggle about it. It's like, haha, that's silly. But, you know, when you're Eric, his super jump's awesome. You use it all the time.
Yep, you can get to hard-to-reach places, skip parts of a level.
It's invaluable when you fight certain bosses.
Yeah, and you can hit people and not take damage. It's crazy.
Yep.
Almost game-breaking. No.
Nah, I don't know about that. Konami would not have allowed that.
Nah. On the note of the characters, though, this game it has a sequel, sort of, in Portrait of Ruin, the DS game that came out somewhere in mid-2000s, I think.
I haven't played it yet, but I just picked it up, and I'm kind of looking forward to playing it. Like, playing Bloodlines is what made me want to pick it up, because I kind of like the backstory to Bloodlines, and I know that Portrait of Ruin takes place in 1944, right?
Yeah, during World War II.
So it's kind of the same thing, except a new World War.
Yeah,
World War II, Electric Boogaloo.
It has pretty similar themes and stuff now that I've played this game too. It's funny because I did this one in reverse. I played that game first, and I came to this when I found out about it. Have you looked into the differences between the different versions of the game?
There's a big difference in Eric, that's for sure.
Yeah, there is.
Have you seen... He looks like straight-up androgynous in the Japanese version.
He's a Bishonen.
Bishonen, yeah, that's right.
Bishi. Yeah, when they ported that here, they decided to make him look more manly. There's other pretty big differences too, like apparently on the title screen, in the American version, there's of course blood and stuff dripping.
Ooh.
And in the PAL and Japanese versions, this game's actually called Castlevania: The New Generation.
It sounds silly.
It kind of does.
It sounds like an 80s cartoon show.
It sounds like the WWF from 1994.
A new generation of heroes emerged. Flamboyant show stealers. Excellent executors. And gaudy bad guys. All on the rise in WWE.
But instead of blood, there's water dripping on the title screen.
That's a little silly.
Yeah, it's kind of stupid. There's other stuff too, though. Like the game's just a lot more bloody in general, and there's even little bits like, you know how when Eric dies, he gets impaled by his own spear.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen in the other versions of the game.
Oh man, I thought that was a nice touch.
It's just too violent. Harpies flying around and having blood
Losing their
squirt out.
heads. And do you know what this game is rated in North America?
T for teen.
No, GA.
What?
Meaning general audiences. General, I think that's what that means.
Yeah,
So
yeah, it was general
it's the early '90s equivalent of E for everyone. This game was everyone could play this game. It's fine. It's not violent.
Yeah, this was just shortly after they did the ESRB thing. So a lot of the ratings were different back then, but how this got a GA, I have no idea.
They must have not even tried. Like that's the only thing I could arrive at. Like you're like chopping harpies' heads off, and there's blood going everywhere. And I mean, the game just has a dark theme anyway.
There's dead birds twitching on the ground.
Yeah.
The guys at the ESRB office were like, "Hey, you need to rate this Castlevania." What? GA. I'm done.
They probably all just started, more or less.
Yeah.
And they were like, okay, if it's called Mortal Kombat, we'll rate it M, and if it's not, we'll rate it GA.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, okay, we're done. All right, I'm going to lunch.
It's just, I guess we're just more hardcore than Japan and Europe.
All right, well, we've talked about the story and the characters, but what about the game itself?
It plays a little bit more traditionally compared to, I guess, Castlevania 4, where you had the whipping in all 8 directions.
Uh-huh.
And your movement's a little bit hampered in this game overall. I do notice, for the most part, the game's not as frustrating to play, though, compared to all of its others.
Yeah, it has a couple parts where it slows down a little bit, and you get a tiny bit frustrated, but for the most part, I thought they did a really good job of making, like, it's one of those, like, fairly hard things. Like, if you die, it's because you screwed up.
Yeah, I really got that from this game. There's not really a lot of cheap deaths or, like, in the old games when you get hit near a pit, you just fly off and die.
You're screwed. Yeah, you're just done.
There's not a lot of pits you just fall in either. There's no screen scrolling that kills you.